How's it, dude? Palm. The pioneer of handheld computers, many would argue they invented what eventually became the modern smartphone. Unfortunately, the company slowly fell into irrelevance over the years. It's a crazy story of poor management, involving the guy who invented the iPod and Steph Curry. Yeah, but how does that even happen? Palm was founded in 1992 by computer pioneer and neuroscientist Jeff Hawkins and a few of his friends. They were convinced that the future of computing was in mobile devices. Like many great tech companies, they started out making software. Specifically, they did software for PDAs, which were essentially handheld computers, or smartphones before smartphones. They wanted to help design a product for people to carry around and use as a tool in their everyday life. They wanted to create not only a portable computer, but a replacement to daily planners and notebooks.
And we came up and realized that our competitor, what we were trying to compete against, was not computers and big computers, it was paper systems. People use paper systems today, they have little paper organizers. And so we started thinking, like, well, how am I going to provide more value than a paper system? And that, people hadn't done that before.
The first product their software shipped on was the Zoomer PDA by Casio. Originally, their product didn't have a name though. The Casio ended up selling pretty poorly, but business quickly opened up thanks to deals with other companies. Most notably, HP. They're important for the story later on, so remember that. Their first major breakthrough was software that they called graffiti. It was the first major software that accepted handwritten letters as a form of typing, and it did well. Using a stylus, you could write down things onto your PDA. In 1995, the company was purchased by US Robotics for $44 million. Under US Robotics, Jeff and crew released their first major product, the Pilot 1000 and 5000, not yet using the Palm name brand. Jeff describes the device as meeting the 4 major criteria he saw in the market.
We came up with a set of 4 criteria for the product, basic criteria. One was size, had to be very small. One was cost, had to be under $300. Another was exchange data very seamlessly with a PC. And the fourth was we had to have this ease of use like a paper system. And we really worked on those 4 functions. We never got ourselves distracted by technology. We never got ourselves distracted by conventional thinking.
The device saw relative popularity for its use of the brand new Palm OS, which was the first of its kind to be developed for touchscreen use, albeit via assistance via stylus. And it was also notable for its sub-$300 price point on the cheaper model. It later earned spot number 4 in PC World's 50 greatest gadgets of the past 50 years. Meanwhile, Palm engineers had been working on their biggest entry into this category. They were going to release a flagship device under the new Palm brand. Dubbed Project Tungsten, development began within US Robotics, revealed in March as the Palm Pilot Personal and Palm Pilot Professional. Running Palm OS 2, the devices saw massive popularity and launched the PDA market to new heights. Priced almost identically, yet offering more features than the year before. Palm became the best-selling PDA company up to that point, owning over half the world market share. Later in 1997, US Robotics was purchased by an even bigger conglomerate called 3Com. Palm had now switched leadership twice, and the new company wanted to take Palm in a new direction. Jeff and his original colleagues from the company left to start their own, which became Handspring Inc. in 1998. Both companies essentially operated in tandem for a while, developing and building very similar products.
Today, Handspring is the up-and-comer in the PDA market. NPD Intellect research shows Palm holding a 64.4% share of the handheld market, while Handspring has 19.5%.
Both companies were focused on this idea of the handheld computer, a device that was information first and voice second.
Cell phones are huge today.
Right.
And right, they're selling 400 million this year, and we'll sell maybe, the market will sell less than 10 million handheld computers. Right. So you would say these people obviously have a big head start here.
Yes, they do.
In their minds, there was a dichotomy between the cell phone and the PDA. These weren't 2 early products converging into one, as we see them today, but 2 separate products battling for supremacy.
They're coming from a voice-centric world where they take a great voice device and they're trying to add data to it. And they're trying to add it in a no-compromise way. It's a no-compromise cell phone, but it's a very compromised data device. We're starting from a different design point. I'm starting with a sort of a no-compromise data device, and I'm going to add voice to it.
And cell phones had gotten the head start, but Palm was certain that that was about to change. Next, they released the Palm 3 series. They had to drop the Pilot name due to copyright trouble with Pilot pens. The Palm 3 launched in 1998. And had an infrared link for transferring files and flash memory. This made it the first Palm device that didn't forget everything when you remove the batteries. Over the years, it spawned countless variants. The X line was a scaled down model with an LCD, and the E series did the same, but at a cheaper price point. Finally, in 2000, they released the Palm 3C, which was their first device with a color screen. It supported 8-bit color. There was no Palm 4, but I think the handspring visor could probably be considered a Palm 4. Developed by that other company from earlier, it also ran Palm OS, and was likely sold by Palm distributors alongside actual Palm devices. The Palm 5 launched in 1999, and its all deal was its thinness. The Palm 7 also launched in 1999, and saw the heftiest price tag yet. Yeah, I don't think they know how numbers work. The first truly wireless Palm, it had a fold-out antenna for calls, all for $600, and a data plan that started at $10 a month. Consumers weren't ready for that kind of price, so ultimately it flopped. But with the turn of the century on the horizon, some big things were about to change for the company. Okay, real quick, I don't have a sponsor for this video, but I wanted to shout out my friend Jade. She's the one who inspired me to start a YouTube channel, and for some reason she has less subscribers than me now. That's criminal. Anyway, she does these cool stop motion short films. I voice act in almost every single one of them if you wanted any more incentive to watch them. The videos take a really long time to make, that's why she doesn't post very often, but one of her next videos coming up is a short film that I'm gonna help her make. That's right, my first short film is debuting in June. We're working on it together, and it'll probably go up on her channel, so go check it out. The link will be down in the description. In early 2000, both Palm and Handspring became independent, publicly traded companies. That's right, Palm was no longer owned by 3Com. This was right in the middle of the dot-com bubble, where increased interest in the internet caused all the world's tech companies to artificially inflate in value. Their shares inflated to an all-time high of $95 on the first day. I'm not an economist, and I don't totally understand how this works, but the reason it's called a bubble is because it's all fake, so eventually that's gonna pop one day. And it did. Over the next year, Palm's value plummeted down to just over $6 a share, losing over 90% of its value. This swift plummet meant that Palm was ripe for hostile takeover. Some speculated from Apple or IBM, but that never happened. Instead, Palm diversified. The next year, 2002, they split into two companies. The second company was Palm Source, which was in charge of developing and licensing Palm OS. The original still built and sold the PDAs that were supposed to run Palm OS. The Palm trademark, as in the name Palm, was jointly owned by each company, meaning that in order to buy Palm in its entirety, you'd need to take over both companies. Then, in 2003, the hardware team bought out the equally struggling Handspring team, remember them, and the division was renamed Palm 1. That's right, the original band was back, but let's back up. We kind of skipped a few years there. What did they make during that time? Well, first, they released the Palm 100 and 500 series in 2001. The 100 series was their cheap entry level, and the 500 series was more of a flagship. Personally, the Palm 500 is like the most iconic device they've ever made. That's what I think of when I hear Palm. Their affordable price, especially on the 100 series, allowed them to sell quite well, despite the company's struggling stock. Then, in 2002, the number system was ditched in favor of a new, flashy naming system. They introduced the tungsten-lined, high-end premium handhelds, alongside the Zyre line. This was their entry-level line, and was actually the first Palm device priced at under $100. The best in this line was, of course, the TX, still seen as one of the best PDAs ever to this day. When Handspring had still been independent in 2002, they released a new line of PDAs called the Trio. After being bought in 2003, they continued selling models, but now under the Palm brand. The Trio 600 was the first Palm-branded Trio device. It launched with a smaller form factor and a camera. Taking inspiration from the recently popular Blackberries, this device looked to bridge the gap between the phone and the PDA. The added functionality and portability of this device caused it to do quite well, making this device and its eventual successor, the 650, quite popular for the company. In 2005, Palm 1 bought back the other half of the Palm copyright and reverted their name back to just Palm, complete with a new logo. Shortly after, Palm Source was bought by a Japanese PDA competitor, Access. The development of Palm OS was now out of the company's hands. I'm sure because of this, Palm started looking for other operating systems to run on their devices. They had a working prototype of Palm OS 6, nicknamed Cobalt. Built from the ground up, the OS was said to be the best one yet by far. But for whatever reason, they never brought a device to market using it. In 2006, they released the Trio 700W, which ran Windows Mobile.
Only Verizon Wireless has the new Trio 700W smartphone, the first Trio to run mobile versions of Microsoft applications, just like your PC.
At the time, it was the most customizable open-sourced OS. This meant that any company could use it or change it to their liking. Kind of like Android today. You guys know my opinion on Windows Mobile. It was great in the late 90s and in the early 2000s, but by 2006 it was wildly outdated. Even though it looked completely different on every brand that used it thanks to that customizable factor, the underlying system was visually and functionally antiquated. However, the Trio's 700W did surprisingly well. Windows Mobile was antiquated, yes, but it was still the best on the market at the time. Not for long though. Apple changed the smartphone game with iOS and the first iPhone in 2007. This was the first true catalyst that made Palm realize the flaw in their plan. Prior to the release, the Palm CEO had been cited as not being worried about the then rumored Apple phone, but that quickly changed when they realized how revolutionary it was. The iPhone had many PDA-like features, but also incorporated a small form factor, calling, a camera, and many other features that made it more of a cell phone than a handheld computer. The merging of these previously separate devices caused the iPhone to successfully reinvent the new device category we now know as smartphone. Sure, there were other devices we can consider smartphones before this, but the iPhone was by far the best among them. Heck, I would even consider the early Palms primitive smartphones, but the iPhone was like above that. The main reason that the iPhone was so revolutionary was the capacitive touchscreen. It didn't need a stylus. Seen as a given now, they seamlessly integrated it with a modern OS to create a clean and virtually effortless experience. Now that the smartphone wars had officially been declared, Palm had to change their offerings, and they had to do it quick. Luckily, they had already taken a few steps in the right direction with the Trio line. They had also announced a new project earlier that year, the Palm Folio. It was a sort of shell for your Trio in the shape of a laptop. It had a bigger screen and a keyboard. It's unclear if it actually had any hardware inside that did anything for the performance, or if it was just an accessory. I said it's unclear because this device was cancelled. Despite generating a lot of media buzz, Palm probably realized this sort of device wouldn't sell. Funnily enough, a couple of Android manufacturers have tried this since. I've covered a few. They all end up flopping. Palm saw that all the way back in 2007. Their next device, the Palm Centro. It was even more compact and portable than the Trio, and thanks to a deal with Sprint, you could get the phone on a plan for only $99. It was exactly the same as the deal the iPhone had with AT&T, but a whole lot cheaper.
Cent has gone Centro. So can you for as low as $49.99.
They were definitely copying Apple just a little bit, but keeping the original PDA utility. Of course, the biggest difference is that it still had a QWERTY keyboard, because a lot of brands still weren't in on the whole touchscreen thing. Palm was one of them. The Centro was by far their most successful device to date, selling over 2 million units. The Trio 500V released this year as well. I actually got a hold of one. Very similar to the Centro, the 500V was the first Trio to focus on touchscreen compatibility. Of course, utilizing a stylus. Starting price was much higher than the Centro, and it shipped with Windows instead of Palm OS. For that reason, it didn't really sell quite well. But you can see how this was essentially just a modified Centro looking to take on the iPhone. Yeah, he actually got that wrong. The 500V came out before the Centro, so whereas the 500V was their first kind of foray into the touchscreen world, the Centro was a more refined and cheaper version of that ended up doing much better. The Centro didn't actually come out until the spring of 2008. He got that wrong. Alright, back to the video. Later that year, Palm sold a 25% equity stake to a firm called Elevation Partners. This was a move to help please the investors, as the iPhone's success was making Palm start to slip. The CEO announced in 2008 that the company was officially done selling PDAs, and then left. He was replaced by the John Rubinstein. Yeah, if you don't know why that's a big deal, he designed the original iPod. Like I said, by now they had been experimenting with other OSs, specifically different versions of Windows, but so far they weren't quite happy with the results. In January of 2009, they unveiled their next big OS, along with the product. The Palm Pre was their first device classified as a smartphone, and it ran their new software called WebOS. WebOS was wildly revolutionary for the time. It featured some almost unheard of features. Apps could be minimized, grouped together, and run simultaneously. The software recontextualized how consumers used their phones, with plenty of people posting their own personal optimizations, or flows of the software. By now, of course, Android was out, but this blew both Android and iOS out of the water. It was paired with a pretty substantial phone as well. The Palm Pre revolutionized in many ways. The design was natural and elegant, not unlike the original iPod's philosophy. The Pre also reinvented gestures. Using the touchscreen, users could access folders of apps, go home, and access a quick menu by swiping up. It was the perfect example of software and hardware integration that built upon the success of the iPhone. The phone was so revolutionary, they came under fire from Apple for patent infringement. But then again, Apple was threatening to sue just about everyone at this time. By this time, tensions between Palm and the rest of the phone business were high. Palm had become famous for poaching talent from Microsoft, Google, and especially Apple. Like seriously, Palm and Apple really hated each other. John Rubinstein became famous for signing over like a bunch of Apple employees, so much that Tim Cook proposed a no poaching policy, which is just like totally unconstitutional. The thing was, with Palm entering iPhone territory with the Pre, it was obvious there would only be one winner. Either the old giant of PDAs or the new pioneer of the smartphone age. I imagine, because of all these new talent acquisitions, Palm reported one of their biggest quarters of loss. The company had been on edge since before the iPhone, and the Centro or the Pre weren't quite enough. The release of the Pixie later that year didn't help either. A sort of successor to the Centro, it failed to meet expectations. They even released the Pre and Pixie Plus, even more refined versions of these phones, with the Pre removing the home button entirely. For whatever reason, despite general success with their new WebOS devices, Palm lost $22 million in Q1 of 2010, and they began secretly looking for another company to buy out Palm. In April, computer manufacturer HP bought out Palm for $1.2 billion. Remember them from earlier? And the deal was completed in July. This began a new era for Palm, but it wasn't a good one. The Pre 2 released towards the end of this deal, mostly free of HP influence. HP decided to sort of revamp the line. They were going to release a line of devices that was so strong that the company was sure to make a comeback. Here's the lineup: the Pre 3, the Veer, and the Touchpad. The Veer was sort of a spiritual successor to the Pixie, which was a derivative of the Centro. Finally, the Touchpad was a brand new WebOS tablet, something that hadn't been done up to that point. The most important factor was all three of these devices dropped the Palm branding.
The HP Veer with WebOS works like nothing else.
Simply being manufactured under HP, and the former Palm team was renamed to WebOS Global Business Unit. This effectively killed any brand recognition the company had. Sure, these devices were Palm made, but manufactured and distributed by HP. These were Palm successors only by memory. Even worse, the Touchpad was just bad. Like, historically bad. By August, HP had announced they were halting all WebOS production, software and hardware. They said they would be, quote, exploring options to optimize the value of WebOS software going forward. This new line did so bad that the Pre 3 and Veer never even made it to America, and units were pulled from shelves across the world. HP took such a hit that touchpads were being sold for a fraction of the original price, in fire sales as low as $99. They were bought up in mass, and people began jailbreaking the device to run Android. Ironically, that led to a surge in popularity for the device. It was a cheap Android tablet, but at that point, it was too late. HP never made another Palm device, simply absorbing the company and its assets to never be used after that one product launch. From initially offering to buy the company to discontinuing their products completely, HP took 16 months to drive the company into the ground. A bunch of HP guys got fired, and most of the Palm team left, including the iPod guy. What was left of the team became the new company called Graham. You may actually recognize this company from their work doing nothing. They did absolutely nothing. Finally, in 2013, WebOS, its rights, and all of its assets were sold to LG Electronics for an unknown amount. Today, WebOS has been retooled to run on smart TVs, and is still used on a lot of LG TVs today. In fact, until about 6 months ago, I used one. It was incredibly average. By the way, LG also used to make phones. They were really weird, and I made a whole video about it. There was one final resurgence of the Palm phone, but not in the way you might expect. As early as 2014, the Palm copyright was rumored to be sold to TCL Corporation, and the Palm website redirected to a mysterious coming soon page. After several rounds of press reveals, the new Palm phone launched in October of 2018, backed by American basketball player Steph Curry. Yeah, I didn't see that one coming. He actually wore it on a lanyard to all of his games for a while. It was a small Android companion device that aimed to reduce smartphone usage by supplementing your main phone. It flopped pretty hard, and it was only Palm phone in name. Totally different product, none of the same people worked on it. So yeah, the not so graceful fall of Palm into absolutely nothing. Once a pillar of mobile devices, the company slowly declined into irrelevance thanks to both poor management and a lack of innovation. And of course, thanks to all my members listed right there. You can check out my Instagram for more behind the scenes content. I have more videos just like this one, and party on, dudes.